Significant about that it shows the collusion question, the idea that the president is cleared of all wrongdoing, which he keeps saying, is not true. The collusion question is very much still active, and not only that, it's very much active when it comes to the president himself. It's not just people around him, and so it shows that, and it also shows that this is moving very quickly, but it's not ending anytime soon. It seems to be, they're still asking questions about these very significant pieces of the investigation.
There's a name that's been talked about a lot when it comes to WikiLeaks, and it's Roger Stone, a guy who was in the news again yesterday for his DMs with WikiLeaks, although they didn't have anything specifically to do with a form of collusion. It was more of a personal vendetta of some kind he seemed to be settling. What do they believe Roger Stone knows? Remember, he said Podesta's next in the barrel, and the emails came out. Where does he fit into this puzzle?
The way he fits in is that the questions that are being asked, there were a lot of questions about the president's relationship with Roger Stone. He was on the campaign for a brief amount of time. They've obviously known each other for a really long time. The questions are, that Mueller's team has been asking is, did they still communicate? How was he fired? Was he fired? Did he leave on his own? What's the relationship like? And so, he's very much, he's boasted about his connections to WikiLeaks. He's, kind of bragged about this. And the question that investigators want to answer, and perhaps already know the answer to, is whether there was some way in which he communicated this, whatever knowledge he had, to the president, so the president was aware. Now, Roger Stone says that they didn't discuss this, and he says, he maintains that he never had any direct contact with Julian Assange and was not involved in the effort to leak these emails.
Well, we're going to talk a lot more about your and Katie reporting throughout the morning. Meanwhile, Attorney General Jeff Sessions is pushing back against President Trump's criticism and sending what some see as a message of solidarity from the Department of Justice. On Tuesday, Sessions announced the Inspector General would look into Congressman Devin Nunes's allegations of surveillance abuses like the one against former Trump advisor Carter Page. But Sessions' decision to trust Michael Horowitz, who had served under the previous 4 presidents of both parties, was met by skepticism yesterday morning on Fox and Friends.
I have a few questions about him, though, because DOJ, because DOJ and FBI, highest standards, right? Highest power in the land as far as law enforcement is concerned. This guy, he works for the DOJ, and he's going to be investigating the DOJ?
He does.
Should we be worried about that?
He apparently is a man of integrity.
So that's on Fox and Friends. Later, President Trump tweeted this. Why is AG Jeff Sessions asking the Inspector General to investigate potentially massive FISA abuse? Will take forever, has no prosecutorial power, and already late with reports on Comey. Isn't the IG an Obama guy? Why not use Justice Department? Lawyers concluding the president did. Disgraceful in all capital letters. Sessions then released a statement of his own, writing, "We have initiated the appropriate process that will ensure complaints against the department will be fully and fairly acted upon if necessary. As long as I am the Attorney General, I will continue to discharge my duties with integrity and honor, and this department will continue to do its work in a fair and impartial manner according to the law and the Constitution." Amid these new tensions between the president and his attorney general, the Washington Post reports special counsel Robert Mueller has been investigating the period of time last summer when President Trump seemed determined to drive Sessions from his job. People familiar with the matter tell the Post that a key area of interest for the investigation is whether these reports were part of a months-long pattern of attempted obstruction of justice from the Oval Office. All parties involved declined to comment. The report claims that behind the scenes, Trump has derisively referred to Sessions as Mr. Magoo. It's a cartoon character who's elderly, myopic, and bumbling, according to people with whom he has spoken. Trump has told associates that he has hired the best lawyers for his entire life, but is stuck with Sessions, who's not defending him and is not sufficiently loyal. The reports depict solidarity among the Justice Department. Quote, on the anniversary of Sessions' confirmation earlier this month, senior aides decided to buy Sessions a bulletproof vest with his name.
Behind the Russia investigation.
The Post also reporting Mr. Trump has been referring to the Attorney General behind the scenes as Mr. Magoo. A new attack yesterday with the president now calling the Attorney General disgraceful. And this time, Jeff Sessions is responding. Here's CNN's Laura Jarrett.
Well, at long last, after months of public attacks by the president and too many tweets to count, the Attorney General finally hit back. The rare statement from Jeff Sessions just hours after the president essentially called him a disgrace and took a shot at the Inspector General, the internal watchdog at the Department of Justice. Sessions said, in part, as long as I am the Attorney General, I will continue to discharge my duties with integrity and honor, and this department will continue to do its work in a fair and impartial manner, according to the law and Constitution. Now, the backdrop to all of this drama is that on Tuesday, Sessions had told reporters that the Inspector General would deal with the allegations outlined in the House Intelligence Committee's, the Republican memo, the so-called Nunes controversial memo outlining purported surveillance abuses by the FBI surveilling Carter Page, a former Trump associate. And he said he would make sure that the Inspector General made sure that the process was carried out appropriately. But clearly that wasn't good enough for the president, who took direct aim at the Inspector General, Michael Horitz, as a so-called Obama guy. But the real question now is, what does this statement from the Attorney General mean for his future at the department, and whether it will have any effect on how the president treats him? Dave, Christine?
Yeah, another fact.
If she stepped down, it should be only a short time before he does as well.
All right, maybe that's a little hyperbolic. 48 hours of chaos at the White House, punctuated by this. Hope Hicks is stepping down, leaving the president without one of his most trusted aides.
Now, pressure is ramping up on Jared Kushner, first son-in-law. New report says big loans went to his family business after he met with those lenders at the White House.
Take the guns first, go through due process second.
Take the guns first, go through due process second. That really happened. President Trump leaving Republicans and the NRA shocked. He appeared to back Democratic-favored gun measures, even to the left of the Democrats' gun measures. Now several big companies are taking the lead on gun violence. He was talking about mentally ill people. He wasn't talking about everything.
Right.
He was talking about mentally ill people and taking the guns away before the system proves them mentally ill.
Due process, that's...
Exactly. Can you imagine if Barack Obama had said that? Or Hillary Clinton, or
any president
anybody
ever said
Welcome
that.
back to Early Start. I'm Christine Romans.
I'm Dave Briggs. We are stunned. 5:32 Eastern Time. We start with the president, who, of course, values loyalty above all else, now without arguably his most loyal aide. White House Communications Director Hope Hicks is resigning. The longtime Trump staffer set to depart in the coming weeks. The decision comes just a day after Hicks admitted she told what she called white lies to protect the president.
The White House official says there is, quote, nothing nefarious about Hicks leaving. The president calling her outstanding, a great person whom he will miss. An ally close to the president tells CNN the president had berated Hicks after her testimony to Congress on Tuesday. A tearful Hicks announced her departure to the White House communications team, saying she felt like now is the right time to go.
One of Hicks' close confidants tells us, quote, the last few weeks were really, really hard for her. The friend says Hicks started thinking seriously about resigning when the Rob Porter spousal abuse scandal erupted. Hicks and Porter were romantically involved.
For those keeping score, that is 4 White House communications directors, plus 1 who took the job but never served in just over a year.
The average for that position, 580 days. Another damaging report this morning concerning Jared Kushner. The New York Times reporting his family's real estate business secured substantial loans after Kushner held meetings at the White House with the lenders. Those loans, including one for $184 million from Apollo Global Management, after the company founder went to the White House to discuss infrastructure.
Another loan for $325 million from Citigroup came shortly after a White House meeting between Kushner and Citigroup's CEO. Kushner stepped down as CEO of the Kushner Companies when he started at the White House, but the Times reports he has retained a vast majority of his interest in the firm. Kushner's lawyer, Abby Lowell, told the Times he has taken no part of any Kushner Company business since he joined the White House.
The battle lines between Jared Kushner and Chief of Staff John Kelly appear to be even more entrenched after Kushner's security clearance was downgraded. The source says Kushner remains exasperated by Kelly's decision, openly asking others in the West Wing, why is Kelly doing this? And feeling that everyone is out to get him. Now, the Wall Street Journal questioning whether Kushner and first daughter Ivanka Trump should have positions in the White House at all.
The Journal, on its typically conservative editorial page, is suggesting they could serve the president better from the outside. Mr. Trump's second year could determine his presidential fate as Mr. Mueller's probe rolls on, and midterm elections give Democrats a chance to take the House and impeach him. Mr. Trump needs the discipline that Mr. Kelly has imposed. Mr. Kushner and Ivanka have to decide if they'd serve themselves and the president better by walking away from their formal White House roles. That is the editorial page of the Wall Street Journal.
All right, the monumental task of describing what happened in the last 48 hours falls on Tall Copen's shoulders. Good luck to you, Tall. Let's start, though, with Hope Hicks. Most of America has probably never heard of the communications director, but that does not describe how valuable she is to President Trump, how long she's been there. How big a loss is this, and how will we know?
Well, it's certainly a tremendous loss when you talk about the sort of emotional loyalty connected, sort of people around the president. Hope Hicks has been with him since the very beginning of his campaign. There's almost no one else, even in the country, but certainly in the White House, that has had that kind of longevity with them besides, his own children. And so, you have seen reports of almost a father-daughter relationship between the two. Certainly you talk about communications director, you'd think her focus was communication strategy, but she really was a Trump gatekeeper. She was at his side. There are reports she was always the last one to walk him to the residence at night. So she has certainly been right there with the president, and it will be interesting to watch what the effects of her departure are in terms of what we see coming out of the White House and, who they bring in to replace her and whether there's anyone else in the White House who can fill all those gaps that'll be created.
Really a gatekeeper for reporters, too. Like the president and the president is his own communications strategist,
Sure.
really. She was the one who helped him execute that. I mean, she could go beyond all of it. We just saw some video of people who are also not there anymore, but Steve Bannon and Sean Spicer and Reince Priebus and others. She was Donald Trump's direct connection to the media around them. Let's talk about Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law. The president's running the White House like a family business. He really is. And he said he was going to do that. He said he was going to drain the swamp and do it his way. But the pressure on Kushner is pretty significant here. Now you've got this new reporting this morning. The Kushner's meeting with CEOs of companies, and then his family's business then is getting loans.
Yep.
Is this sustainable?
It's hard to say whether it's sustainable, Christine, and certainly this comes on the heels of the reports of how he couldn't maintain his security clearance and had to be downgraded, which cuts him off from a substantial amount of intelligence that diminishes his ability to be at Trump's right hand on a lot of issues. And he sort of came in as supposed to be the fix-it guy who was going to take on everything from Middle East peace to IT in the federal government, and we'll have to see how much of that sort of Mr. Everything he can maintain. But, then there's the question of sort of the interpersonal relationships in the White House and, the feuding between Chief of Staff John Kelly and Jared Kushner and whether they trust each other. It's hard to say whether it's sustainable, but keep in mind, ethics officials say it's not just about whether there's impropriety, it's whether there's the appearance of impropriety. And it certainly, even if these loans had nothing to do with those meetings, it doesn't look good for the administration, for the government to have that kind of connection between a White House official and that much, hundreds of millions of dollars moving to a private company.
Yeah, questions have always been asked about the north of $1 billion loan they have out on 666 Fifth Avenue, how that will impact Kushner in the White House. But when it comes to Kushner and Hicks, we always say that the president values loyalty. How much he offers it is another question, because Jeff Sessions under attack yet again. Sessions, who was pretty much the first senator to come out and support this president as a candidate, give him conservative credentials. Well, Trump hits him again on Twitter. Why is AG Jeff Sessions asking the Inspector General to investigate potentially massive FISA abuse? Will take forever, has no prosecutorial power, and already late with reports on Comey. Goes on, and then finishes with that doozy in all caps, calling him disgraceful. Couple of questions here. How does the guy 24 hours earlier said he would run into a school shooting without a gun, not have the, whatever you want, the bravery to just fire a guy? And how does this dysfunctional relationship continue?
Well, it certainly seems untenable, but I also feel like we've been having this conversation periodically since June, July, when it really, felt untenable then. And, both of them sort of toughed it out and didn't want to be the one to blink. And, one of the things that's really fascinating to me about this is you talk about sort of the palace intrigue of Trump being mad at Jeff Sessions, but it sort of actually is hiding what may be arguably a much more serious issue, which is that the President of the United States repeatedly is trying to direct his Justice Department's investigatory resources. And, you talk about the Attorney General. The Attorney General, historically, that role has been to make sure the Justice Department is independent. The American democratic system requires that the Justice Department is above politics in its investigations, and that is why, there are guidelines and there are rules about what the White House can and cannot and what the president can and cannot direct. And so, yes, this is him attacking Jeff Sessions again, but the reason you saw Jeff Sessions fire back is that it's also him trying to say what the Justice Department should investigate and how, and that is a growing concern as well in terms of the relationship between the Justice Department and the White House.
Weaponizing the DOJ.
Yeah.
Problematic, to say the least.
Let's talk about weapons, by the way, because the president yesterday with this extraordinary bipartisan meeting on guns, where he talked about the mentally ill and how he says the mentally ill should be stripped of their guns. Listen.
Take the firearms first and then go to court, because that's another system. Because a lot of times by the time you go to court, it takes so long to go to court to get the due process procedures. So you could do exactly what you're saying, but take the guns first, go through due process second.
This is how the Daily News puts it. They don't love Donald Trump over at the Daily News.
Not so much.
His hometown tabloid there. Tal. Oh my gosh! If a Democratic candidate said that, they're taking our guns. This is against the Constitution.
Yeah, basically. I mean, you know, it's astonishing to have a politician, not just a politician, but an actual office holder, suggest removing due process when it comes to taking away guns. And certainly this has always been the sort of conspiratorial attack
he's just
from the right
talking
to left.
tough. I mean, he's just talking tough. You know, the president likes to be tough and say, we're just going to do it. You know, you heard him talk about, you know,
or is it just theater?
When you arrest somebody, you put the suspect in the, in the car. You don't have to be too easy on him. You know, this is how he talks.
And he's not a big fan of due process in general. I mean, you know, there are a number of ways he sort of chafes at the notion of, you know, this sort of court procedures as he references. You know, it's not just in this instance. I mean, he's, you know, apparently reportedly talking about being much, much tougher, including perhaps executing drug dealers. So, you know, it's sort of consistent with that thread from the president in terms of being a little frustrated with some of the democratic processes that this country has. But, you know, it was always this notion surrounding Trump in the campaign that some said, well, he's the one who can break down the walls of the partisan politics and go places that no other politician could go. Certainly, this is one instance where he said something no other politician would. The follow-through is always the big question here.
Right, deja vu. Is this Tuesday, Thursday Trump like we saw on immigration? Was this just political theater? We shall see.
Nice to see you. Thanks a lot. Okay, two of the nation's leading gun sellers are limiting sales. Walmart will no longer sell guns to anyone under 21. Recent events inspired that change, they say, adding that its heritage has been serving sportsmen and hunters, and it will continue to do so in a responsible way. You know, this announcement came just hours after Dick's Sporting Goods raised its age to 21, its minimum age to 21. And Dick's will also stop selling those modern sporting rifles, those AR-15 type weapons that seem to, I don't know, they inspire something in some of these deranged kids. That's the gun that was used in the Parkland school shooting. Since then, students and consumers have pressured companies to cut ties with the gun industry, forcing many brands off the sidelines. Here's the Dick's CEO yesterday.
We concluded that if these kids are brave enough to organize and do what they're doing, then we should be brave enough to take this stand.
You know, he said, it was so interesting, he said he didn't want his business to be part of this story anymore. He didn't want to read about a school shooting or a mass murder and hear that the gun had been purchased or the shooter had bought something at Dick's. More than a dozen businesses have cut NRA ties. Corporate activism can be good for business, which has some questioning the motives. Consumers love companies that take a stand, especially young consumers. And as this New York Times op-ed says, people may prefer that their brands prove this love by identifying which favored social causes rather than through the old-fashioned expedient of paying their workers a little bit more money. There's always a cynic who's going to find a way to say they're not going to do this unless it's good for them. Maybe in the near term you lose some customers, but in the longer term they think they're on the right side of history.
Ed Stack reminds gun owners he is a gun owner and he is a strong supporter of the Second Amendment.
You know, and I'll say something else on Walmart. Walmart also will no longer sell toy guns or those airsoft, those non-lethal airsoft rifles that are really popular among kids who, you know, BB guns that you can go out and, you know, play soldier, play army in the woods. They're not going to sell those for kids either.
All right, some big stands. Vladimir Putin giving his annual address to lawmakers, and he's making
new. Let students into his class.
White lies. White lies, or as Melania calls them, vows.
White House Communications Director Hope Hicks reportedly admitted to investigators that she told some white lies on behalf of President Trump. Yeah, then Hicks admitted that that was a white lie, and in fact, she actually makes up all the time.
She did acknowledge that she sometimes tells white lies for Trump. Well, duh. Telling lies to white people is what got Trump elected.
I knew that was coming. I knew that was coming.
Well, it's interesting, right? Because the reporting is that the president was furious at that. Even though he's told, according to the Washington Post, more than 2,100 false or misleading statements in just over a year, he was angered that she admitted to telling a white lie.
This is somebody who, one of the things about Hope Hicks that many people credit her with is being able to manage through Trump's outbursts when he gets angry. You know, that she's always manages to manage him and other people around him.
Now it's someone else's job.
Trump without hope. Let's get a check on CNN Money this morning. Global stocks falling overnight after another down day on Wall Street. The Dow down 380 points. That's about 1.5%. The S&P losing about 1.1%. It's a fitting end for both averages' worst month in 2 years. The worst month in 2 years. February was a wild one on Wall Street. Inflation fears sparked a market sell-off, including 2 1,000-point plunges on the Dow in 1 week, quickly followed by its best week in 5 years, a snapback. Inflation worries are here to stay. The concern to combat inflation, the Federal Reserve will raise interest rates faster than planned. So look for any kind of inflation and interest rate guessing to really move stocks in the weeks and months ahead. Spotify is going public, but its initial public offering is not like other IPOs. Spotify plans a direct listing, meaning it will sell shares directly to investors. It won't hire a Wall Street bank to underwrite the stock offering. That will save Spotify hundreds of millions in fees. But underwriters provide price stability for a new stock. So Spotify warns it may have a volatile start. Spotify is the biggest music streaming company in the world, 159 million monthly users. Hashtag time's up for the gender pay gap, at least in some workplaces. According to a recent survey of HR execs, 48% of companies are reviewing their pay policies. Why? To close the gap between male and female employees. The survey was inspired by the hashtag #MeToo movement and the call for women's equality in the workplace. On average, women earn about 80 cents for every dollar a man makes. The gap is even wider for women of color. And what I've been hearing from some people in their people and leadership teams on some of these companies is they're worried about a worker shortage, a good worker shortage, and they feel like if they can prove that they have equal pay, they can keep their best talent better.
So we're seeing this going to improve here ahead.
Well,
we hope. You've been saying that for a while.
I've been saying it for 20 years,
you have.
and we're still at 80 cents on the dollar, so we'll see if it works.
All right, Early Start continues right now as we try and recap an insane last 24 hours at the White House.
If she stepped down, it should be only a short time before he does as well.
I don't know about that exactly, but a chaotic 48 hours at the White House punctuated by this. Hope Hicks stepping down, leaving the president without one of his most trusted aides.
Now pressure ramping up on Jared Kushner. A new report says big loans went to his family business after he met with those lenders at the White House.
Take the guns first, go through due process second.
Due process second. President Trump leaving Republicans and the NRA shell-shocked, appearing to back Democratic gun measures, in fact, tacked to the left of them. Now several big companies are trying to take the lead on gun violence.
The NRA supported this candidate in such a big way, and now as president...
No one's been a bigger champion of the Second Amendment, said the president.
He said, take guns away from the mentally ill before due process.
But was that Tuesday Trump versus Thursday Trump? We are the day after. Wednesday, Dave Briggs and Christine Romans. Thanks for getting an early start with us.
It is Thursday, March 1st, 5 a.m. in the East, and a lot to get to. The president, who values loyalty above all else, is now without one of his most loyal aides. White House Communications Director Hope Hicks resigning. The longtime Trump staffer set to depart in the coming weeks. She has been through thick and thin with this president, 3 years at his side. The decision comes just a day after Hicks admitted she told what she called white lies to protect the president.
A White House official says there is, quote, nothing nefarious about Hicks leaving. The president calling her outstanding, a great person whom he will miss. But an ally close to the president tells CNN the president berated Hicks after her testimony to Congress Tuesday. A tearful Hicks announced her departure to the White House communications team, saying she felt like now is the right time to go.
One of Hicks' close confidants tells us, quote, the last few weeks were really, really hard on her. The friend says Hicks started thinking seriously about resigning when the Rob Porter spousal abuse scandal erupted. Hicks and Porter were romantically involved.
For those keeping score, that is 4 White House communications directors plus one who took the job but never served, Jason Mueller, in just over a year's time. The average for that job, 580 days.
All right, another damaging report this morning concerning Jared Kushner. The New York Times reporting his family's real estate business secured substantial loans after Kushner held meetings at the White House with lenders. Those loans include one for $184 million from Apollo Global Management after the company founder went to the White House to discuss infrastructure.
Another loan for $325 million from Citigroup came shortly after a White House meeting between Kushner and Citigroup's CEO. Kushner stepped out as CEO of the Kushner Companies when he started at the White House, but the Times reports he has retained a vast majority of his interest in the firm. Kushner's lawyer, Abby Lowell, told the Times he has taken no part of any Kushner company's business since he joined the White House.
The battle lines between Jared Kushner and Chief of Staff John Kelly appear to be even more entrenched after Kushner's security clearance was downgraded. A source says Kushner remains exasperated by Kelly's decision, openly asking others in the West Wing, why is Kelly doing this?
And feeling that everyone is out to get him. Now the Wall Street Journal questioning whether Kushner and first daughter Ivanka Trump should have positions in the White House at all. The Journal, on its typically conservative editorial page, suggesting they could serve the president better from the outside. Quote, Mr. Trump's second year could determine his presidential fate as Mr. Mueller's probe rolls on and midterm elections give Democrats a chance to take the House and impeach him. Mr. Trump needs the discipline that Mr. Kelly has imposed. Mr. Kushner and Ivanka have to decide if they'd serve themselves and the president better by walking away from their formal White House roles.
All right, joining us now live from Washington, CNN politics reporter Tal Kopin. Tal, I'm going to put a list of things on the screen that happened in the last 48 hours. Wow.
On one screen, or do we need several to get through?
We need like 3 screens. All right, so how do you characterize the last 48 hours, Tal?
Well, you know, on the one hand, a part of me is like, well, it's another 2 days in the Trump administration. I mean, it sort of feels like this is the pace of news that we've grown accustomed to, but it's remarkable, and it's continued headlines that sort of point to disarray, to a reorganization, a reshuffling, and it's easy to get sort of sidetracked by the palace intrigue aspects of all of it. But keep in mind, I mean, these are the people crafting policy for the United States and steering the ship. It has broader implications beyond simply the sort of whiff of chaos and the drama that we're, sort of focused on with the personalities. Yeah. This has serious consequences for, the way our nation is led.
Well, Hope Hicks, some have called her sort of Donald Trump's Prozac, right? What is the White House like without Hope Hicks, I wonder?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to have to find out. She certainly was very close to the president, with him, arguably the longest, the closest to him, other than his children in the White House. Right. With him from the beginning. Reports that she was sort of the last person to walk him to the residence every night. I mean, it's hard to imagine the Trump administration without Hope Hicks, but I guess we're going to see what that's like.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? I mean, most Americans probably have no idea who she is. We never hear her speak. But we understand her role is integral in this White House. It should be interesting in terms of guiding this president, who he confides in now that Keith Schiller and her are gone. But let's talk about another person under fire in this White House, Jared Kushner, the first son-in-law, someone who the president also confides in. Yep. This new reporting suggests that 2 people whom he met with the White House then provided major loans to the Kushner companies, who Jared has stepped away from, but we're talking about $184 million from one, the co-founder of Apollo Global Management, and then another for $325 million from Citigroup. That's more than $500 million. This is why White House visitor logs should be public. How does Jared Kushner survive all this, given that his clearance has already been downgraded?
Well, Kushner is clearly under fire in this White House, but, at the end of the day, President Trump surrounds himself with people he trusts, and he has gone already, we've seen, to great lengths to keep those people, even when his advisors recommend he doesn't. So, there's always a chance that he just powers through and continues. But keep in mind, ethics officials have said from the beginning, ethics laws aren't just about actually preventing impropriety, but preventing the appearance of impropriety and the appearance that someone could be bought or influenced. And that was always their concern, having these individuals in the White House who have these complicated business holdings, that have international connections, that have, various things that could be loaned to or donated to, or, hotels that could be stayed at. It's the concern that even if these loans were on the up and up, just seeing them causes questions. Right. And that's why ethics officials had so much concern about these individuals being in these positions.
All right, to guns now. A remarkable day on the gun front. In the morning, you had the Dick's CEO saying they were no longer going to sell guns to 18 and 19 and 20-year-olds. Remarkable that they were going to be limiting some long guns in the rest of their stores. Walmart also following suit, saying it's going to raise the age to buy guns. And then the president having this bipartisan meeting about guns where he said this shocker.
Take the firearms first and then go to court, because that's another system. Because a lot of times by the time you go to court, it takes so long to go to court to get the due process procedures. So you could do exactly what you're saying, but take the guns first, go through due process second.
Talking about the mentally ill, he's talking about people who should clearly not have guns. But to say you seize the guns first and you do due process second, the Daily News this morning characterizes it like this. Not very favorable.
Well said.
Post Trump up in arms. The NRA must be just like reeling here.
Yeah, well, a couple things. First of all, as Dave alluded to earlier, you've got the Tuesday versus Thursday Trump situation, as Lindsey Graham put it, but this notion that we've seen him convene one of these bipartisan meetings before, where he sort of freewheeled and suggested things that are really contrary to the Republican base on immigration, and then 2 days later had completely returned to the sort of the right entrenched Republican positions that really scuttled a deal at the end of the day. So I think a lot of lawmakers are sort of saying, well, we'll believe it when we see it. But, let's also remember, while this is definitely a position anathema to the NRA, President Trump has not shown a high regard for due process, let's say. I mean, this is also a president who's reportedly musing about perhaps using capital punishment on drug dealers and has often talked about, sort of throw them in jail or kick them out. I mean, he doesn't seem to be one who really has a lot of esteem for a lengthy court process to protect some of these rights. So it's not entirely a shocker that on this point, too, he would also say, why slow down with these sort of steps? Let's get to the heart of the issue.
But it's one thing to infuriate NRA leadership. This is every gun owner's biggest fear in the United States, that you're going to start taking their guns. And this is a Republican president. Right. This is a guy who said there's no greater defender of the Second Amendment than me. So that's why it's so astounding, regardless of where he goes from here on this issue on Friday. Let's listen to this interesting interaction between the president and California Democratic Senator Dianne Feinstein, positioned to the president's left in this extraordinary meeting.
Dianne, if you could add what you have also, and I think you can, into the bill.
Yeah. Joe, are you ready?
Can you do that? Joe, can you do that? Pat, can you add some of the things? You're not going to agree with me.
Yeah, if you help.
Well, no, I'll help.
You could listen, you could just watch that. You could put it on mute to see the body language of Dianne Feinstein loving where the president's going on guns is astounding. He's tacking to her left, positioned to her left. Regardless of where he goes, how shocking was that?
I mean, it's remarkable. And keep in mind, there was always this potential, and it's one of the things that earned him some votes. There was always this potential that Trump would be a rare politician who was not beholden to particular partisan ideologies. That was sort of part of the mystique, this notion that he's not really that familiar with the long entrenched positions, and he doesn't care as much about the outside groups or, the sort of third rails of politics. Again, we haven't yet seen him actually follow through. So if this is an instance where he actually follows through and says, you know what, to heck with the outside groups, I'm going to do what I think is right, it could be a remarkable watershed moment. But a lot of people are waiting to see, sort of the proof in the pudding on this and not get too excited, Dianne Feinstein's body language aside, simply by a statement or a suggestion.
Sure. As you covered, Stephen Miller, Tom Cotton brought the president back to the right on immigration. Who does that on guns?
Or maybe
several
he
people
is
in
the
that
disruptor.
room and or the NRA.
Maybe he becomes the disruptor, and then the liberal elites or the political elites whose approval he craves, really. Maybe he gets that approval in the end and wins.
Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me.
All right, Tal, nice to see you this morning. Come back in about 30 minutes.
Ahead, the teacher strike in West Virginia not ending today as planned. The latest next. Special counsel Robert Mueller investigating a period of time last summer when President Trump appeared to be trying to drive Attorney General Jeff Sessions to quit. Mr. Trump publicly attacking Sessions in July 2017.